This week, we're going to get creative with tongue depressors, coffee stirrers, toothpicks, and green stuff, and create these awesome looking spike traps. Hey there, and welcome back to Tabletop Witchcraft. This week, we're going to do a fun, easy build that's going to go way back, again, like last week, to my childhood. And we're going to go ahead and make some spike wall traps. As a kid, I used to like taking some paper and just drawing little stick figure dungeons. And each separate room in the dungeon would have different types of traps, acid pit, spike traps, a room with a big tank with a shark in it, which really got my imagination going. So this week, we're going to do this spike wall trap. It could be used in a dungeon. It could be used in a fighting pit up along the wall. All different uses for this. You can find a link in the description below to where you can download those plans. And all those downloads there really help go a long way to help supporting this channel. I really appreciate it. All right, let's go grab some supplies and let's get crafting. So I started this video off by going to my trusty box of wooden items. I got some popsicle stick type of things here, some toothpicks, and some tongue depressors. And using the plan, which you can download in the description below, using this just to measure off my lengths here, but that's pretty much just a 3x3 grid for the wall. Now grabbing this block and some 320 grit sandpaper, I'm going to go ahead and just file off the bottoms of each of these. It just makes them look a little bit better here than having the cut end from the wire cutters. Now I've used hot glue to glue these literally right to the plan. Don't worry about it. You can cut the hot glue off, which I'll show you here in just a minute. Real easy. And it's this part right here where you want to make sure to get plenty of hot glue on the sticks here, because we're going to end up drilling right through where we're gluing these things down to. And if you don't have enough glue, obviously you're going to be taking it off and it's going to fall apart. I made a ton of these and I've never had one fall apart. But that's because I had a lot of hot glue, so just don't forget to do that. And don't worry about any whiffs too with the hot glue. I'll show you how to take care of those here in just a minute. Now I used a pin vise to initially drill these holes out. Nightmare. I wouldn't recommend it. It takes way too long. I will put a link in the descriptions below to all the tools and stuff I use here that I got on Amazon, so you can check those out. But the real winner here is this power tool. 1, 2, 3, as you can see, drills these holes right out. And also you can see that's why you want to make sure you have plenty of glue, because if you don't, you're removing it there and you can have a problem. So I just use this Alpha knife to literally just peel off or carve off the hot glue on the back of these. And if you can't get it all off, don't worry about it. We're going to take a lighter to remove all the little bits and pieces that we weren't able to carve off. All right, and don't worry about catching these things on fire. It's not going to happen. If you're just holding it on there for just a second or two. That's the nice thing about working with wood and hot glues. You can do this method to get rid of anything that you don't want. Not the case so much with foam. So what I'm using here, a little bit of wood glue. You could also use Eileen's tacky glue, but I think the wood glue is the better choice here, obviously, because we're working with wood. And it's gonna kind of like lubricate the toothpick a little bit to help you get it in place, because it is a snug fit, which you want. It also helps hold everything together. So once you get those in place, just place it glue side down and press on each one of these, and it's going to snap each one of these into its final resting place, and it's really going to lock in this piece for good. Now this is just some granny grading, marking this out here with a marker. You get this stuff online. Again, description below, you can find it, but you don't even need a tool here like a straight edge to cut this stuff straight. You can use the grid lines themselves to keep you true right there. And then I just use a little bit of hot glue to stick it on. All right, back to the plan. Now we're using the tongue depressor for our base. And we are going to clean up the edges here like we did earlier with some sandpaper. And as you can see there in the background, all those little holes are from drilling those holes out earlier. You want to make sure to do this on a wood block because you'll drill right through your mat and the table. Even if you're using a pin vise, you'll go right through it. Now this little piece of wood we're going to use to help secure really, the wall to the base. So with just a little bit of hot glue on the tongue depressor, you can see a little piece of wood that my thumbs are on right now on the back. Just press all of that right into place. And this is really, really sturdy. A little bit of glue holds it right up, real nice. And we're gonna lock the front in here in just a minute as well with some super glue for another feature that we're gonna add. So these things are pretty solid once you're done. Now here I'm just using a little bit of flat black spray paint to basically just kind of like you know, prime these things up. You know, you could use a brush, but you know, such little nooks and crannies here, I would definitely use a spray paint. Now for the wood method, you might have seen this in one of my previous videos, the wood fence. I'll put a link above. This is a territorial beige that's getting painted on real thin right over the black paint, almost so you can see through it. And then we're going to edge highlight that with a really light, like a country gray on all the edges. And you know, you could even do probably like the top third of each one of those planks as well. It really makes a really nice aged, weathered wood look. All right, now for locking them back in again, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of super glue on the base here, and we're gonna spread this out. You wanna get a little bit of super glue up onto that back piece of wood. You know, you don't want it totally flat. There's really no character to that. And we're gonna add some baking soda to this, and that's gonna give us a nice 2-scale look of sand up against this spike wall. And you only have to let this sit on here for maybe, I'd give it maybe 10 minutes, and you're all set. You can brush it right off. All right, we are gonna do some green stuff sculpting. These spike walls are looking good, but they need some more color on them, and we have all those spikes. We had to put them to use. So we're gonna mix up some green stuff, and we are going to skewer the spikes with a couple different styles of shields, as well as some tattered robes and cloth. Now you see me talking about, or you hear me talking about clay sculpting tools. The pack that I bought has like 10 or so tools in it. Use whatever you're comfortable with here. I end up using like 2 or 3 out of that pack. But I'm making a kite shield or like a tower shield here for my first one. So it's a little bit of like a teardrop or like an upside down egg shape to start. And then I'm just using this clay sculpting tool, obviously, to sculpt the clay here. And you want to keep the tool you know, wet. It keeps the green stuff from sticking to it. And you want to work on a piece of glass. It's going to allow you to pop the finished piece off when you're done the next day for a working surface. And you know, all this is a picture frame that I picked up you know, at Walmart. Now you see I'm using my finger to literally pull up towards the center of the shield. I want to have a ridge line running right down the middle of this thing. So you know, simple as that. Again, it doesn't take long. If you don't keep your fingers damp, it sticks to it, so you can see how easy it is to kind of manipulate the green stuff as you're working with it. Now this sculpting tool, again, keep it damp, and you don't want to do, see I'm doing like little strokes. You don't want to do long, big pulls the full length of the shield, because you'll literally pull the green stuff and distort it. Little tiny strokes on it until you get to the depth that you want. And this is just going to be a metallic border around this that I'm going to do like a gunmetal color or a steel color. And the inside, one half will be yellow, the other half will be a light blue. Alright, now here you can see I'm going ahead and I'm putting a little scratch in the shield to look like it kind of shattered a little bit. And that will really stand out once you go ahead and put the wash over this section. And now to make things easier on myself for later on, poking a little hole here, that's where the spike's going to come through on the shield. So the cloth, you might have seen me do this in one of my previous videos. It's a real fun, easy way to make ragged clothing here. Get some green stuff, give it a quick tear. You don't want to do it slowly because you'll just pull it to a fine point. So give it a quick tear on each end. You'll see the left side of this piece of cloth really has some fine pieces of green stuff attached to it still. That's fine, those will stay there. This stuff really does a good job once it cures. So just fold over each half on itself. Right here you can see it. Just let it touch the other section, and real quickly this stuff adheres to itself. So that'll hold up nice. And you can see how that looks like a tattered cloak or a cloth. Now when you place this onto the glass, don't lay it down flat. You know, add some like wavy features to it, because again, once it cures, it's going to stay like that, and it's going to add a lot more character to the cloth, you know, for the final result. Alright, now I wanted another shield here, and same technique earlier to get that rounded section there. Here I'm adding some wood planks in the center, and all I'm using is this X-Acto to exaggerate each wood plank that makes up the buckler. And you want those pretty deep, pretty wide. Then we just scratch the surface of the whole shield like this, real light, with the X-Acto knife, and that's going to add some wood grain to that. And believe it or not, you're going to see all of that texture once we paint it. And this is just another little piece for the center of the buckler to add some more color to it. And we're going to paint the rim of this bronze and the center a dark brown. And like we did with the kite shield earlier, we're just going to poke a hole here. And now I'm pulling up and tearing away from where that hole is to make it look like the shield, you know, kind of like burst open and splintered. And I like that effect so much. I actually went ahead, even though this is metal, and just kind of pulled away a little bit on the shield itself. And this is just a black wash that I'm using here to go over the whole thing. A little, we're going to use some brown wash here for the sand. Little side note, I ended up spilling half of this all over my workbench and my brand new floor when I was making this video. Kind of a sad moment. But here we're just going to use a brown wash from Vallejo, and we're going to do a dry brush over this again in that linen color here in just a minute. Now this is just a little bit out of focus, but all I'm doing is stippling black red paint around this spike to make it look like you know, it did its job here on somebody. And I'm just gonna puddle up a little bit of the red paint on that cross bracing as well. You know, you can make some black in with that black red from Vallejo to darken that up a little bit more if you want. Now the fun part, to decorate all these spikes with some shields and cloth. Just sticking them right onto the toothpicks there. Hang them in a natural fashion too. Don't have everything perfectly straight up and down. You don't want to have the cloth, you know, angle it a little bit like it's blowing in the breeze, you know. And you can see that bottom left, I actually have a little citadel skull I poked onto one of those. Now if I can remember, I want to add this little post-it notes into the background when I'm painting. It gives you the name of the paint and the company and the product number. Now if you want to pick up the same one. And all we're doing is a light dry brush over the sands with that. Again, you might have seen this technique in a previous video. I'll put a link up above to my sewer series. We're going to add some pigments to the sand, and all we're using is some airbrush thinner to lock everything in place. So we just add a little bit of that on there, and then we'll drop on the pigments. Now at first the pigment's really going to soak up into the airbrush thinner, but we're going to keep applying it layer by layer until we get the effect that we want. And don't go right into that airbrush thinner and back into the pigment container, because you'll kind of destroy that. Just make sure you don't touch the airbrush thinner while you're working with this. Use a toothpick to kind of just tease it around, and you'll be all set. And I use literally a dry brush to get that powdered effect moving up the timbers on the wall itself. And I used a Krylon matte finish to lock all that in. I did about 3 or 4 coats, and it held pretty decent. Now I didn't show how I painted all of the cloth here on every one of these pieces, but I did want to show just the basic technique. And the base color here is that dark purple, and I'm just going to my palette over here, and I'm grabbing a little bit of white, mixing it with some purple, and I'm doing some edge highlighting and then wet blending that in to the base color that's still wet on the cloth. So every time I go back to the palette, I'm kind of drying off the brush a little bit and grabbing a little bit more white than purple, and then I'm only doing less and less of the cloth so it's brightest towards the edges. And the nice thing about doing this method, if you take the light color, I believe like I did there, a little too high up into the dark area, just dry the brush off, clean it off, grab some of your original color, in this case that dark purple, and work your way in the opposite direction from dark to light. Alright, and then I just wanted to darken up the darkest parts of this cloth just a little bit more. So I went ahead and grabbed some Nuln Oil just to hit that up real quick. And then I ended up drying the brush off a little bit, grab a little bit of water and use that to kind of blend the wash in a little bit as well. Now we went ahead and we pretty much finished the wall here. We're going to do a final edge highlight with some more of that country gray on all of just the edges of the wood here. And you want to get pretty much just the top 45-degree angle, like where the sun would be hitting this thing, and the left and right edges as well. Now we want to really accentuate the spikes here. We want them to really stand out. So you want to take some silver paint and make sure to touch the tip of every one of these spikes here to make them each stand out. And on a few of them you can kind of dry brush the tops to make them stand out a little bit more. But on the tips of every one of these, I like to touch it with some silver paint. It really makes them stand out. And then I decided I wanted a little bit more blood effect on these. So I grabbed some red Vallejo paint and I mixed it with some Games Workshop Reikland Flesh Shade wash. And I had to go back and forth a few times, adding more wash to this to get it to the dark color that I wanted. That was just a little bit of plain water there. But to be honest, I think you might have been able to get away with just using the Reikland Flesh Shade wash for the blood effect here, the dried blood effect. Because what I'm looking to do is really color the sand or stain the sand with some of this blood effect. Now I almost had a huge mistake here, a huge mess up, but that drop actually landed pretty much where I wanted to anyway. So it's kind of saved there. And as you can see, I'm just using this little pipette to drop the blood where I want, and that's a really cool effect, how that kind of like capillary action pulls the blood through the pigments. So I really enjoy making these small little builds. You can really take a lot of time on a small piece, add a lot of detail for something that looks really awesome on the game table. Now, if green stuff sculpting isn't your thing, you don't want to get into sculpting, you can always go to websites like Reaper or any other multitude of other sites out there that sell accessories for miniatures, and just buy shield packs or weapon packs, and you can drill holes through those and stick these right into the spike wall as well. Now, I enjoy doing this so much, I'm actually contemplating starting up a little like sub-series of just all traps that can be used throughout the tabletop gaming world. If you have created traps or you have a favorite trap that you would like to see in a dungeon, leave a comment below and let me know. You might see it in an upcoming video. So, if you found anything useful out of this video, if you enjoyed it, you had a good time, please consider liking and subscribing. Head on over to Patreon, check that out. Bunch of cool tiers over there, a lot of cool people over there to talk with and share our crafts with in this community. So until next time, I'll see you around.